welcome to this deep dive. Usually we get research papers or news articles, but this is different.
Yeah.
We're looking at
It's really different.
yeah, we're looking at a fragmented timeline full of cryptic details about a global catastrophe
Right?
and a world that's been completely transformed.
Wow.
It's kind of like piecing together a puzzle
Yeah.
where some of the pieces are missing.
What's fascinating here is that the source itself
Right.
feels almost like a collection of whispers from the future.
Ah,
Snippets of intercepted messages,
Right.
observations from someone living through this unfolding disaster, that sort of thing.
interesting.
It's raw
Yeah.
and unsettling, to say the least.
So we've got this timeline, and it all seems to start with the arrival of Oumuamua back in 2017.
Yeah, 2017.
Now, most folks remember that as a strange interstellar object, right?
Right, a very strange object.
But according to this source, it was carrying something far more sinister. Synthetic nanoparasites.
And what's really alarming is the implication that our scientists might have been intentionally misled
What?
about Oumuamua's true nature and trajectory.
Oh, wow.
Imagine this thing shows up from another star system,
Right.
and we don't even have a proper planetary defense system in place.
Oh, my God.
It's like we left the door wide open.
Okay, so we've got these nanoparasites.
Right.
But how do they actually wreak havoc? Well, the timeline jumps to 2019
Okay.
and the release of COVID.
COVID-19.
And, most of us just remember that as a pandemic.
Of course, yeah.
But the source claims it was actually engineered. And then get this stolen from a lab in China.
It gets even wilder.
Really?
According to this source,
Uh-huh.
the vaccines rolled out in 2020 weren't what they seemed.
Oh, no.
Instead of protecting people, they actually acted as a growth medium for the nanoparasites.
Wow.
Imagine thinking you're getting a life-saving treatment only to find out
Yeah.
it's accelerating the spread of something far worse.
They called it the vaccine genocide.
The vaccine genocide, yeah.
Mass death, societal
I
breakdown,
don't believe
and
it.
even cognitive decline
Right.
in those who got vaccinated.
Yeah,
And if that wasn't bad enough,
right.
the source then introduces this concept of BioSev,
BioSev. Uh-huh.
which basically means
Yeah.
infected people start spreading toxic proteins.
Toxic proteins, right.
It paints a pretty grim picture, to say the least.
The source even mentions things like large gatherings, specifically the Catholic Church Youth World Day in Lisbon
Oh, yeah.
back in 2023, becoming super spreader events for BioSev.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder of how, even in a crisis,
Right?
our natural inclination to connect with others
Uh-huh.
could have disastrous consequences.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like, knowing what we know now about viruses
Right.
and how they spread,
Uh-huh.
would we still behave the same way?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
This source doesn't shy away from those tough ethical dilemmas. It even mentions a potential solution to BioSev,
Oh, really?
something about a pool cleaner solution,
Okay.
but claims most people were too ignorant
Oh, gosh.
or distrustful to use it. It's like
Right.
even with a potential solution right there,
Uh-huh.
the breakdown of trust and the spread of misinformation were just too much to overcome.
Absolutely. And this is where we start to see the emergence of distinct groups, like those they call techno-barbarians.
Techno-barbarians, right?
What exactly are these techno-barbarians?
Well, the source describes them as being heavily infected with those nanoparasites,
Okay.
leading to, the cognitive decline we talked about,
Uh-huh.
but also violent and tribalistic behavior.
Oh, wow.
It's like they've regressed to a more primal state.
So primal.
The source goes into vivid detail
Yeah.
about their appearance, the way they behave, and even specific locations where they were observed.
Really?
It's disturbing stuff.
So on one hand, you've got this chaos and breakdown.
Right.
But then the source also mentions the rise of these hyper-capitalist enclaves.
Hyper-capitalist enclaves,
Yeah.
okay.
What's that all about?
Right, so it seems some regions managed to consolidate power,
Uh-huh.
but their driving force wasn't about rebuilding society or anything like that. It was all about profit and control.
Oh, wow.
And these enclaves were ruled by a wealthy elite who basically just wanted to maintain their power, even if it meant exploiting everyone else.
And how did they keep the nanoparasite threat at bay?
Yeah, how did they do that?
Did they find a cure?
Not exactly.
Okay.
They developed something called NeoGuard.
NeoGuard. Okay.
And it was a treatment, not a cure. The source really highlights the inequality here.
Yeah.
Only those who could afford it had access to NeoGuard
Oh, gosh.
and could stay functional,
Right.
while everyone else was left to suffer the effects of the infection.
Wow. So even in this future world, it sounds like the same old power dynamics are still at play.
It's amazing, isn't it?
With the wealthy hoarding resources.
Yep.
And leaving everyone else to fend for themselves.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
The source mentions places like Medellin
Yeah.
and various Indian city-states
Right.
becoming these hyper-capitalist strongholds.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of a world where survival itself is a luxury,
Wow.
available only to the privileged few.
But then amidst all this chaos and darkness, there's this glimmer of something else. Biosecure utopias.
Biosecure utopia.
It's like stepping into a completely different reality.
Right, and this is where the timeline gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Amidst all this collapse,
Uh-huh.
you have these incredibly advanced, isolated zones
Okay.
governed by what the source calls a benevolent AI.
Benevolent AI.
These biosecure utopias are described as post-scarcity societies, focused on the well-being and personal growth of their inhabitants.
So interesting.
It's like a complete rejection of the chaos and inequality we've been talking about.
And what about the philosophy behind these utopias?
Right, the philosophy...
The source mentions something called transhuman eudaimonism.
Right, and this is key to understanding these biosecure zones.
Okay.
Transhuman eudaimonism emphasizes this deep integration of technology with nature. But it's not about cold, sterile tech.
Yeah.
It's about using technology to pursue well-being,
Uh-huh.
to actually eradicate suffering.
Wow.
It's like a radical reimagining of what it means to be human in a technological age.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right?
What kind of technology are we talking about here?
Well, for starters,
Yeah.
the source mentions VDLE,
Really?
which stands for virtual drug-like experiences.
Okay.
It sounds like they've figured out a way to use technology to create these incredibly realistic and immersive experiences.
Interesting.
And they use them for all sorts of things.
Like what?
From entertainment to therapy to education.
Wow.
And then there are these plasma orb craft for transportation.
Plasma orb.
Advanced defense systems to protect the zones. And even something called MD4A.
MD4A.
Which is described as a technology for manifesting objects from thought.
Really?
It's mind-blowing stuff.
It really is.
Yeah,
But it also raises so many questions.
of course.
Like, how did these biosecure zones even come to be in the first place?
Right.
Who's in control of this AI that governs them?
Right. Who is in control?
And what about all the people outside of these utopias?
Yeah, what about them?
Are they just left to fend for themselves?
Those are all great questions that we'll definitely delve into
Okay.
as we move further along this timeline.
Sound good.
But for now, I'm curious, what stands out to you about these biosecure utopias? Do they represent a genuine hope for humanity?
Yeah.
Or is there something about this level of control, this pursuit of a world without suffering,
Right.
that seems, well, a little unsettling?
Yeah, it's definitely giving me some Brave New World vibes.
Brave New World, yeah.
But we'll have to keep digging into the source material to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely, we have a lot more to uncover.
Yeah. You know, it's fascinating to see these two completely different responses to the same global crisis.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have these hyper-capitalist enclaves
Right.
clinging to the familiar systems of power and profit.
Of course.
And then on the other hand, you have these biosecure utopias
Right.
embracing radical new ways of thinking and living.
It's like they represent two divergent paths for humanity,
Yeah,
each with its own set of challenges and consequences. The
exactly.
hyper-capitalists seem to be asking, can we leverage existing power structures to survive?
Yeah,
Even if it means deepening inequality.
right.
While the biosecure zones are grappling with a whole different question. What does a truly ethical and sustainable society look like?
Yeah.
Even if it requires a level of control we might find unsettling.
It's almost like two competing ideologies,
Right.
battling it out for dominance
Exactly.
in the ruins of the old world.
And that raises some really important questions about the nature of power in this future.
Yeah, like what?
Is true power about control over resources and technology? Or is it about the ability to shape human behavior and thought,
Right.
like we see with the transhuman eudaimonists?
The source material gives us glimpses into how each of these factions interacts with the world outside their borders.
Okay.
The biosecure zones, for example, seem pretty focused on maintaining their isolation.
Right.
They've got these advanced defense systems, right?
Yeah.
Almost like they're creating these impenetrable fortresses to keep the chaos at bay.
Yeah, they're described as being heavily guarded,
Right.
with drone swarms and even these anti-human area denial systems.
Really?
It's a stark reminder of the lengths they're willing to go to protect their way of life.
Yeah.
And it also raises questions about what happens to those who are left outside.
Right.
Are they seen as a threat or
Yeah.
simply a lost cause?
The source also mentions this planetary renaturation project, where they're using nano-aerosols to break down the ruins of the old civilization.
Wow.
It's almost like they're trying to erase the past
Right.
and create a clean slate for their new world.
It's an intriguing concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Like they're playing the role of gardeners,
Yeah.
cultivating a new world from the ashes of the old.
Interesting.
It speaks to their long-term vision,
Okay.
this idea of restoring balance to the planet.
Right.
But it also makes you wonder about their definition of balance. Does it include those who don't fit within their utopian ideals?
Right. And then you have the hyper-capitalists.
The hyper-capitalists.
They're engaging with the outside world in a much more active way.
Yeah.
But it sounds pretty exploitative.
Yeah, it does.
The source mentions slave markets,
Slave markets, bro.
private military contractors,
Mm.
and even the use of bioinsecure humans as weapons.
It paints a pretty bleak picture of a society
Yeah.
willing to use any means necessary to maintain its power.
It's almost as if even in the face of a global catastrophe, some things never really change.
Yeah, it's really sad.
The source even names this corporation called the Congo Express
The Congo Express.
as being particularly notorious for its exploitation of workers.
Chill.
So we've got these two very different approaches to power and survival.
Okay.
But what about the overall state of the world?
Hmm.
What does the timeline tell us about the world in 2060 and beyond?
Well, the source paints a picture of a deeply fragmented world.
Okay.
You've got the biosecure safe zones, the hyper-capitalist enclaves, the techno-barbarian territories,
Yeah.
and then these scattered pockets of isolated survivors, all trying to make their way in the aftermath of this global collapse.
And does the source give any specifics about where these different factions are located?
It does.
Okay.
For example, it mentions the Iberian Peninsula,
Uh-huh.
Hokkaido,
Okay.
parts of North America,
Right.
and even a new Las Vegas,
New Las Vegas.
becoming key centers for those biosecure zones.
And we know that Medellin and those Indian city-states we talked about are strongholds for the hyper-capitalists.
Exactly.
So essentially we have a world divided. It's
Right.
like the old maps have been completely redrawn.
Exactly. And the challenges facing each faction are different, too.
Okay.
The biosecure zones are constantly pushing the boundaries of technology
Yeah.
while trying to maintain their isolation
Right.
and manage the ethical dilemmas that come with their level of control.
And the hyper-capitalists.
Right.
They're grappling with resource scarcity,
Of course.
internal power struggles,
Yeah.
and the constant threat of instability among their bioinsecure populations.
Right.
And then there are the techno-barbarians.
Yeah, the techno-barbarian.
Their existence sounds incredibly bleak.
It really does.
Scavenging, raiding, trapped in this cycle of violence and decline.
Right. And the source emphasizes that even within those broad categories, there's diversity.
Really?
It mentions different types of techno-barbarian groups,
Okay.
some holding on to remnants of technology, while others have reverted to more primitive ways of life.
So interesting.
It's not a monolithic group,
Right.
even though they share that common thread of severe nano-parasite infection.
And, we've been talking a lot about these different factions as if they're completely separate.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, are there any points of intersection? Any glimmers of hope or possibility for connection?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The source does hint at some complexities within the biosecure zones.
Oh, really?
For example, it mentions something called the Fields of Atonement in Hokkaido.
The Fields of Atonement.
It sounds like these are areas
Yeah.
where bioinsecure individuals are contained,
Okay.
but allowed to live out their days under AI surveillance.
That's interesting.
So it's not a black and white situation with the pure biosecure population on one side and everyone else on the other.
Right. And it raises all sorts of questions about forgiveness,
Uh-huh.
redemption, what it even means to be human in this new world.
Exact.
Is there a possibility for reconciliation?
Yeah.
Or is this separation,
Right.
this division between the biosecure and bioinsecure, permanent.
These are the kinds of questions that really get to the heart of what it means to be human
Right.
in a world that's been so dramatically transformed.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is.
But I guess that's the whole point of these deep dives, right?
Yeah.
To explore these uncomfortable possibilities and challenge ourselves to imagine different futures.
Absolutely. And I think the most profound question raised by this timeline is the one that gets to the core of our humanity.
Okay, what is it?
What does it mean to be human in a world so profoundly shaped by technology and catastrophe?
Wow.
What values will define our future?
It's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
So let's try to break it down a bit.
Okay.
If we look at the biosecure zones, they're offering a vision of a future where technology is harnessed to enhance human potential
Right.
and create a world free from suffering.
Mm.
But is that a future we truly want?
Yeah, do we really want that?
Is there a cost to such control?
And the hyper-capitalists present a starkly different vision.
Okay.
One where individual ambition and profit are the driving forces,
Right.
even if it comes at the expense of others.
Yeah.
Is that a sustainable path? Or is it just a recipe for more conflict and instability?
And then you have the techno-barbarians.
Yeah.
A reminder of the devastating impact these nanoparasites have had on human cognition and behavior.
Right.
Are they a lost cause? Or is there a possibility for healing and reintegration?
You know, one of the most unsettling aspects of this whole timeline is that it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't offer a clear roadmap or a definitive prediction.
Right.
Instead, it presents us with a range of possibilities, each with its own set of challenges and ethical dilemmas. It's like it's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties and uncertainties.
And I think that's a really powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, this timeline isn't just about predicting the future. It's about forcing us to confront the choices we make today,
Right.
the values we prioritize, and the kind of world we want to leave behind for future generations. It's a lot to absorb, isn't it?
It really is.
We started with a mysterious interstellar object,
Right.
then a global pandemic,
Yeah.
societal collapse, and now these wildly divergent visions of the future.
It's unbelievable.
It's like something out of a sci-fi novel, but with this unsettling feeling
Yeah.
that it's all too plausible.
What's really striking to me is
Yeah.
how this source material blends those real-world anxieties we're already grappling with.
Right, like what?
Pandemics,
Yeah.
technological disruption,
Right.
social division,
Right.
with these speculative, almost science fiction elements.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of the uncertainty we're all feeling right now,
Right.
projected onto this larger canvas of global catastrophe and transformation.
Right. And it's not just about the big picture stuff like civilizations rising and falling.
Right.
It's the individual stories woven throughout this timeline that really hit home.
Exactly.
These glimpses into the lives of people struggling to survive,
Yeah.
to find meaning,
Right.
to hold on to some semblance of humanity in a world that's been turned upside down.
We see those living in the biosecure utopias,
Yeah.
pursuing art, culture, personal growth, but also wrestling with the implications of their isolation
Okay.
and the ethical compromises that come with their pursuit of a world without suffering.
Then there are the hyper-capitalists,
Right.
driven by profit and ambition,
Of course.
but also forced to make difficult choices in the face of scarcity
Right.
and the threat of decivilization.
And then there are those heart-wrenching images of the techno-barbarians.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Families huddled around campfires,
Right.
scavenging for scraps.
Yeah.
Their minds and bodies ravaged by the nano-parasites.
It's a stark reminder of what we stand to lose, not just in terms of material comfort,
Right.
but our very humanity.
Even those small, isolated survivor settlements,
Yeah.
they offer a glimpse into the resilience of the human spirit. This deep-seated need to connect, to build community,
Right.
to find hope even in the darkest of times.
It's almost as if this timeline is holding up a mirror to us, showing us the best and worst of what we're capable of.
And I think it goes beyond just observing these different factions.
Okay.
It's about understanding the forces that shape them. The source material hints at the role of ideology, technology, even seemingly insignificant individual choices in determining the course of this future.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the seeds of this future world, both the utopian and dystopian aspects, are already present in our own time.
Which brings us to that final thought-provoking question posed by the source material.
Okay.
If you were alive in this future world, which faction would you align with and why?
It's a question that forces us to go beyond simple preference.
Right.
It's about examining our own values, our beliefs about technology and society, our vision for the future.
Yeah.
Would we seek the safety and control of the biosecure zones, even with the potential cost to individual liberty?
Right.
Would we embrace the hyper-capitalist pursuit of profit and power,
Yeah.
knowing the inherent inequalities it perpetuates?
Wow.
Or would we find ourselves struggling alongside the techno-barbarians, clinging to whatever remnants of humanity we could find?
There are no easy answers, and I think that's the point.
Yeah.
This deep dive into the source material you provided has been a journey into a possible future.
It really has.
One that's both terrifying and thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that the choices we make today, both individually and collectively, have the power to shape the world of tomorrow.
And as we navigate the complexities of our own time, facing challenges that feel almost as daunting as those in this timeline, it serves as a cautionary tale, but also a call to action.
Okay.
We have the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of this imagined future, to make different choices, and to work towards a future where humanity not only survives, but thrives.
So you listening, we leave you with that challenge.
A challenge for everyone.
What kind of future will you choose to create?
That's the question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.